Alright, guys. Autism assessments. This is not my area of expertise, but because I was referred for an autism assessment and I ended up having one, I thought I would just make a short video talking about what that was like. Um, Obviously, I'm not a clinical psychologist, I'm not an autism expert, so I won't have too much to add to this beyond just what it was like. But I thought it might make a good video for people who are searching around YouTube, who are awaiting an assessment and who may have one booked in and might be feeling a little bit anxious about it, just to kind of lay some of those concerns to rest a little bit, because I really enjoyed my autism assessment. I thought it was great. So a tiny bit of context or backstory. Second psychotic episode, clinical psychologist came and saw me and said, I'm going to refer you for an autism assessment because you've never had one and you're having a hard time with eye contact. And at the time, the psychiatrist was querying whether or not to re-diagnose me from paranoid schizophrenia. Now, I know that that's not a commonly used diagnostic label anymore, but that is my historic diagnosis and it hasn't been updated to some other ICD-11 compatible form of schizophrenia. So the psychiatrist was considering re-diagnosing me from that to complex PTSD, and in the course of that conversation, the clinical psychologist was then like, well, maybe we should look at autism as well. So that's where my journey into autism assessment began. I was put on the priority list because the wait list, I was told at the time, was 3 years. But I had mine in about 3 months. So if you get placed on the priority list, you might not have to wait as long as people who are not on the priority list. I'm obviously speaking for, one autism assessment service in one part of the UK, so I don't know what it's like elsewhere. But, yeah, really enjoyed it. So I had a conversation over Zoom with a really lovely lady who was one of the specialist assessors, and she had this gorgeous blonde Labrador in the background that was just draped over a single bed. And, immediately that communicated, like, this is quite a chilled out process. This is quite a conversational, dialogic thing. And we had a conversation about sort of what I thought about all of it. And I was very ambivalent, really. I was like, well, yeah, I mean, there's what I think, but then I'm open to what other people think as well. So yeah, let's do it. Let's explore it. So we had a chat about my kind of developmental history and that sort of thing. And then I was asked to kind of nominate a couple of people in my life who could comment on my early development and my sort of current functioning. So I provided those people. And then I went to the assessment place, and that was really nice. It was in the middle of an industrial estate, but when I got there, the guy on the front desk was really, really nice. Sort of put me at ease. I think they had, for whatever reason, they just had a sort of general understanding that, like, being quite gentle was quite good in that context, and that really came across. So the guy who saw me at the front desk, lovely. Then I went upstairs, sat in the waiting room. People were sort of milling about, carrying cups of coffee. It was all very relaxed, and it didn't feel very super clinical, right? It felt a lot more kind of easygoing. It was just me and someone else waiting for an appointment. Then I was taken into a room, and I was introduced to the clinical psychologist, lovely guy, and the lady I'd spoken to on Zoom. There was two of them, and on the other side of the table was me. And then they briefly explained what it was that we were going to do, and then they gave me a storybook, which had no linguistic content. It was a purely illustrated book, And I was asked, could you tell us a story using this book? Now, you know, I'm dispositionally paranoid. I spent 5 years studying creative writing, and I'm also a linguist. So I'm probably, in some senses, in possession of a kind of handicap on that task, really, because I've got things that I can draw on outside of baseline storytelling, right? But I was looking at this book, and it made no sense, made no fucking sense, and that was the point. It was a very, very abstract book about various bits and pieces. I won't provide any details in case it's actually part of a structured assessment, you know. But it was a very abstract storybook, heavy on illustration. And my sense of it as a researcher was that it was a story elicitation task that was measuring your ability to take ambiguous stimuli and form a coherent narrative out of that. So you're sort of filling in epistemic gaps. You're structuring content between markers, right? So I did that, and I struggled. I was like, this is hard. And so I communicated that. I didn't just tell a story. I provided a meta commentary on how difficult telling the story was. So I was saying things like, oh, well, you know, this guy looks like he's having a hard time. But, you know, another way of reading it is that he's actually quite happy. You know, it depends on how you look at it. That sort of thing. So that's how I approached the task. And then that was it. That was done. There was a brief interview, I think. There weren't any cognitive tests or any, you know, wasn't like when I did my dyspraxia assessment where it was all like Raven's matrices and Stroop and all of that stuff. None of that. Digit span, reverse digit span, all of that. Like, that was very IQ psychometric heavy. This was way more conversational, dialogic, and narrative, which I was really impressed by. I really liked it. And then obviously there was like the 360 reporting. And the people who were reporting on my development essentially told the assessors that they couldn't remember any of my childhood. So I don't know how informative that was. And then at the end of the assessment, I was told, yeah, we don't think you meet the criteria for autism. And I was incredibly unsurprised by this, right? But it needed to be done because the referral had been made and someone had said, oh, maybe you've got autism. So, you know. So if you're awaiting an assessment or you're concerned or anxious about having one, I would say my experience suggests that there's not really much to worry about. I actually really enjoyed it. Because I've participated in lots of research over the years and lots of assessments and all kinds of things, and that was by far the most interesting and fun. So, yeah, I hope that helps.